So, do I need the mic? I don't even know where it is. So, we're just going to talk a little bit about clear.
You can clip it.
I can't clip it. Can't just get this button clip going here. So we're going to talk a little bit about clear count before we go back to design, just because it feels like we're kind of deep into it already. So I'm starting again with a candidate's ovals. In this case, it is George Smith in the Senate race. And we kind of looked at George's votes, and we actually ranked them top to bottom, left to right, in essentially how well the voter marked the ballot. It doesn't make this one here any less a vote than one of these up here, but we do rank them in order, and it's essentially based on pixelation. Because of the high quality images that we take, things like that is pale yellow highlighter that marked this ballot, we will pick those marks up. But as far as votes go, there's not a lot to see there. Votes are votes. We just show you how we arrived at that. We can click on any one of these and bring up the whole image of the ballot, which we've kind of shown you, so I'm gonna come back to that later. It starts to get interesting when you start to look at overvotes. We will isolate overvoted ballots that involve George Smith, so you can start to look at them and see, okay, this is a vote for one race, it says it clearly there, and this person pretty clearly voted for two, or even something like this. But as you are going through your canvass period, you will likely run into something like that. You probably see those on mail-in ballots. We will float those needles to the top of the haystack digitally so you can find them easily, especially in close races. Certainly voter intent issues like this matter. And I can even click on that oval and bring up the whole ballot. We use a lot of color coding, so you'll see, for instance, this overvote is in red. As we move down the ballot with the votes that were counted, those are in green. You can adjudicate these on screen. Our system allows you to do that. I certainly understand that you may need or want to keep your current processes whereby you might grab a blank ballot and remove the stub and staple it, and I assume you do something like that now. Most counties do. If you did want to do it on screen, we do make it simple. We add this button here, and we will call this a votable ballot, and we can remove that tabulated overvote where Jonathan Hart was obviously marked by mistake. And if I save that, we will actually keep track of that adjudication. Obviously, if you do something like this, you want it to be logged. There are reports you can run where you can see what adjudications you have made. I would imagine in a county the size of Cuyahoga, the staff does a lot of the adjudication of overvotes and then it's presented as a group to the board. Most bigger counties do it that way. Some smaller counties, the board actually is involved in this. You can do it any way you want on our system. Other things to notice.
Just one question really quick.
Yes.
Is your laptop hooked up to what right now? What is it network to?
Good question. This is simulating a clear count adjudication station or administration station hooked to a Linux server. I have VirtualBox running Linux servers on this machine, so it is mimicking what you would have in your office with a Linux server and Windows workstations. Is that not what you were asking?
Brian, I want to know if we're tabulating your paper to do this. Ask it better.
She wants to know if,
He knows what I mean. I know he
yeah,
does.
if they're like you're not actually doing anything in, I don't know what your tabulation software is called, clear count or whatever?
Clear count.
Yeah, so like you're not actually in that, you're just at an adjudication station where you're simulating here. You haven't actually tabulated anything correctly. Okay.
Actually, it is. It's running into the server right now. Now, we have a pretty robust and flexible way to back things up, so you can back things up before you do this if you want. You can always go back.
Our concern is that, just so we got through a little bit of this, we process a lot of our remakes prior to the election day in the unofficial.
Yep.
And we feel a certain kind of way about uploading any sticks into our current system to be able to process something like that on screen.
So we don't tabulate, meaning we don't accumulate any results or any cumulative ballots. That is restricted in the system. You can't do it until the polls close. But you can look at individual ballots at a given time within the system
So it might be accumulating the data, but you can't see it until you step.
It's not accumulated data.
So
It
I
does
can
not
turn
accumulate
off
the data.
results right here.
Yeah,
So-
it does not accumulate. It doesn't even, it's not even that you can't see it.
It's just.
The
it's not
server is
accumulating.
not accumulating it until a person on your team with credentials, once polls close, creates that ability, and that is all logged. Previous to that, you can look at individual overvotes or different things and look at things ballot by ballot, but it is not either accumulating results or tabulating any totals.
You're physically remaking your ballot and rescanning it, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Prior to the polls close.
Yeah.
So it's the same
Well,
thing.
no, we're not taking that stick over to the server and
Yeah,
uploading that
uploading
result.
it,
The
yeah.
SA 50 doesn't tabulate either. So we were doing that and scanning that over there. I
Gotcha.
think the point of our,
And I'm trying to figure out, where do we do this in our operation? So it's, you have scanners working in one spot, and it's not like you have a laptop that's reading off of that. This stuff is all either networked in, or you're using something to load this information elsewhere, where we would also load our.
These scanners are
election.
running right into that ClearCount database. Yeah. We can suppress the results, we won't see any results, we won't even tabulate the results, but you can look at the images.
Yep. And you can either get that at the workstation connected to the scanner with the proper credentials. We can set up different credentials for the actual scanner operator versus this. Or what most customers do is they have what are called administration stations, we call them, or adjudication stations that are just separate. It could be, it's usually like either a laptop or usually like a larger monitor. And that's where your team will come in with their credentials and go through this. But it all accumulates to the same, it's all networked together so that you're on the same system.
I think you kind of just answered my question, but I just want to rephrase it to make sure I understand it. So these
I told you we were gonna
adjudication.
ask the same question at least 4 different ways to make sure that we get the answer that we think we're gonna get.
So if you go to Seattle, they will show you their cabling through the screen, how it all is transparently.
So these adjudication stations, these are actually the same thing as, let's say the station that you would use to lay it out or tabulate it. It's just, so it's a different physical computer or type of computer or setup or something
Yeah, so
like that?
you guys jump in.
I'm sorry, Jim, what did you say?
So the adjudication stations are actually,
No, I'm serious, I'm
so we
seriously,
should- we're
I'm
joking.
I'm
Okay.
being so genuine, that was not
Okay.
real.
I'm trying to understand if the adjudication stations are like actually a totally different computer / setup than the rest of the workstations that you would use to like program the ballots and that
Okay.
sort of stuff.
First of all, it's 2 different servers for design and count.
Yeah,
They're
okay.
2 separate programs. So
Very
you do
specific.
design separately and then count is another server. We run in a browser based, that server is actually on the network as the IP we're pointing to. So the workstations are pointing to that Linux server IP. And that's true on design or count, but they are separated. Design and count are separate operations.
For a very specific reason too, because tabulation is a very different process than creation, right? So AKA making improvements to tabulation and doing innovative things like vote visualization shouldn't be tied into how you lay out your ballots, right? Besides the overall database that it's creating, which is why we structured it that way of 2 separate programs.
Yeah, I
So
think
we-
part of where our questions are coming from is, the system we're currently in now is, we have 4 workstations that
They're standalone.
Yeah, they're networked together, but and then they're connected to a standalone server. We have a backup server redundancy. So everything, whether it's ballot creation, tabulation, is all done, different modules within the system, but it's all there. So we actually have to physically bring we don't have our 850s network to so we have to physically bring everything to our memory sticks, everything, physically bring them to one of those 4 workstations, and then be in the right module.
So we do that automatically.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to tell you, just like, so we're not uploading.
There's no memory sticks for
Yeah,
this,
There's no memory sticks.
It's
We're
all
gonna get there
network.
in a minute, I think.
2
Right
seconds
now-
after one of these ballots was scanned, I could have.
It's already currently ready to be viewed.
Exactly.
So instead of uploading your sticks, it's happening through the network.
I know,
Yeah.
I understand like what you guys are saying, I'm just trying to get there in my head. 'cause it's
That's
like-
why I tried to lay out where we're coming from, that's why it feels like we're a
I
little,
know that sounds
we're like, really,
ridiculous,
like
like,
what?
we can't go
Really
to-
not this slow.
They have a
Well-
difficult job of trying to make me understand.
Well,
That's the hardest part.
I just wanted to make.
We
sure
can't
that
network our
we-
system, we just, we
I
tried,
mean, we
it
can't
didn't work.
even.
But even from the 850s to the system, you have to physically take.
We can network them, when we tried, it didn't work, just based on the amount of images and everything we had.
Right.
They've upgraded since then, and allegedly it does work in the version that they're asking us to go to. It didn't work the first time we tried it, so we're really, like, when people
One second,
say that it works, and it's not like that, we will mistrust it.
I used a phrase earlier, and it's really applicable here. If we look at undervoted ballots, you know, for, in this case, George Smith, I've got my screen too big here. So in this case, George Smith, undervoted, there's a, no vote for him. But we don't just look in the oval, so we actually have a button here that says sort for uncaptured intent. And if I click that button, you're kind of going to see those needles populate to the top of the haystack, and you have things like this, which Ohio obviously being a voter intent state, this could be something you're going to want to see. And we can show you that. And I would deem that this is probably a good vote for George Smith as I examine the rest of the ballot. And much like we did the overvote, you can digitally give that vote to George Smith in really the same manner. But the thing I also like to point out is if you notice, we also have this green over here on the left-hand side of the screen, and these actually registered as good votes for these candidates. And I'm sure you can see why. The line ended up going through the oval. I don't know about the 850s. I will not speak for those. I can tell you on other high-speed scanners in the past, you might have never seen this ballot again. You might have never seen that George Smith probably should have gotten a vote there. Maybe you would on the 850s, I'm not sure, but
Unless it's completely blank,
okay.
or it's spit it out for indeterminate marks, we would never see that ballot.
Okay. Again, so I like